Welcome to the Legit Grit Podcast. I'm Terrence Ogden, founder of Project Grit. 23 years sober, thousands of miles underweight. This show's not about comfort, it's about what happens when you go one step beyond quit. These are real stories from people who've been through hell and decided to lace up their boots and keep going. Around here, it's all grit, no quit. Let's get to work. Episode 1. No leg, no problem. You're about to hear from a man who embodies the phrase, no quit. Daniel Carlton, a retired U.S. Army Special Forces warrant officer. In 2012, an IED in Afghanistan took his leg, but they didn't take his will. They blew him up, they shot him, and he kept going. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about recovery. It's a story about refusal. Refusal to be a victim, refusal to quit, and the relentless pursuit of purpose. This year, Daniel rucked 75 miles non-stop with us on the Immortal 32 Ruck. One leg, no shortcuts, no excuses. This is Legit Grit. Let's get into it. All right, sitting here with Daniel, man. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. How are you?
Doing good,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, sir. My name is Dan Carlton. Just a regular guy, I guess. Husband, father, eight kids. My wife and I have 8 children that are awesome. Army veteran. Spent about 16 years of my life in the Army. Had a great time. Grew up in Southern California, but I left as soon as I was 18. I knew I wanted to leave, go serve, go see the world a little bit, get some experience in life, and so joined the Army. And after all these years, found myself living in Central Texas and really enjoy it out here. So we've been out here for about 12 years. So it's been great.
So what were you into when you were a kid?
Not much, like baseball. Played a lot of baseball. As a teenager, got my hands on a set of drums and a guitar randomly. So I grew up playing music. Started playing in some punk rock bands. Go all across Southern California playing in bands with my buddies. My brother and my cousin, we started a band. We kind of started touring around San Diego and just having a lot of fun. I was still pretty young. I was like 13, 14 years old. Nice. I was playing in bars, which was weird. Even though they were older, to go out and have that experience, we'd go out and play these clubs and stuff like that. But music was a huge part of my upbringing. So trying to write music and just play, just being a self-taught musician, and I guess I use that term loosely because I'm still not a very good one. So that was it. It kept me out of trouble, so just music and sports.
Nice. So was it mainly baseball? Mainly
baseball.
Yeah.
So
were you into skateboarding or anything?
I did skateboard and a little bit of BMX when I was a kid, like a younger kid. But my brother is a big skateboarder. Of course, like whatever he did, I wanted to do too. So all the old school Bones Brigades, Tony Hawk, and Pearl Peralta, all that stuff. Like that was I think it tied into like the Southern California punk rock kind of scene, which kind of influenced me as a kid. So it all tied together.
So what led you to join the Army and then eventually the Green Beret?
I think it's just called a service, pre 9/11. So I knew I wanted to leave California and kind of grow up a little bit and just get some life experience. Didn't have much, so it was a good opportunity for me to get some college money, see the things I'd read about in books. So go to Europe, go to Rome, go to England, all over, and do the things I wanted to do, but could never afford to do it. So that was a big motivator for it. I had a couple family members that were in the military, so I think it'd be cool. My grandfather was, longtime military serviceman in the Army in World War II and all this other stuff. So yeah, I figured it'd be great to do 4 years and get out. But after those first few years, I was like, man, I really like this. This is fun. So it's something I really wanted to kind of just really look at enlistment by enlistment. So every 4 years or every 2 or 3 years after that, and kind of see how things were going. So I had a great time, and initially enlisted as a truck driver. I wanted to drive around Europe and see all these places and things like that. So had a great time doing that in Europe. Was in a field artillery regiment, so hanging out. Got to go to Kosovo, when it was kind of like the peacekeeping phase of that operation. So, which was a great experience for me, being like an 18, 19-year-old kid, kind of seeing the devastation of a war zone, and seeing how that kind of really affects people. And so being able to see that, unfortunately, really kind of shaped kind of, like just, it took me out of my bubble of like what life is like across the world, especially people living in war-torn countries. So, yeah, it's just devastation just to kind of, see how these people were just kind of pulling themselves back up. So, yeah, it was a great experience from my perspective as a deployed soldier, a young soldier, but not too many people were really deploying. So I had a great opportunity.
So was it more than you thought it'd be when you got over there?
I didn't know what to expect. This was 2000. Pre-internet, where people were posting, you see people who are vlogging from around the world and, sharing different experiences. So going into it, I kind of thought we were going into a war country, like all the train ups leading into it, you're like, hey, this is it, like kind of worst case scenarios and stuff. But it was pretty mild in reality. So we'd go and patrol, along the borders of, of Albania and all these places, work with coalition forces, build partnerships and stuff like that. So which was awesome to see how like NATO worked together. So it was a good experience. And of course, coming back from that deployment, you're like, man, I got a deployment under my belt where most people didn't have it at. So made you feel like, like you've accomplished something already. So, it's a pre 9/11. So before people were just on rotation nonstop to Iraq and Afghanistan. So
what inspired you for Special Forces?
Well, it was during that deployment to Kosovo. There was one A-team, an ODA, as they're called, Operational Detachment Alpha, or an A-team, that was right next to our hut. And these guys would, of course, great looking guys, all in shape, great hair, weapons everywhere, and they would roll out middle of the night, wearing all black in a Toyota truck, and they just disappear. Meanwhile, like all of the regular forces were, helmet and, a flak vest, and that kind of stuff. And, I asked my first sergeant, I was like, hey, who are these guys? Why do they just, what do they do? They're not like us. And he's like, well, these are special forces. These are Green Berets, and this is kind of what they go do. And so it just sparked my curiosity. So, I'd muster up the guts to go talk to these guys. I was like an E1, E2, like bottom of the barrel, lower enlisted guy. So I'd go up and talk to these guys who were senior guys and just ask questions. And so hearing what they did, I was just like, man, I want to try. And so I just put that as kind of my focus. Like, you know what, just get in the best shape you can and just be ready. Just go find a recruiter and put in your paperwork and go to the selection course. So like seeing those guys in action is really kind of what inspired me to at least try.
So what were you doing to prepare for selection?
Lived with a rucksack on my back. So, I'd walk, 30 miles, 20 miles, whatever it is, with 75 pounds on my back. Just, fast forward a couple years in North Carolina. That's all I would do. Ruck and go for long runs, rope climbing, pull-ups, your basic kind of Neanderthal exercises, you know what I mean? Just doing what the body can do. So that's my approach to it. And this was really before a lot of information was available online. A lot of these courses were still, nobody knew what was going on unless you'd been there. So, and most of the guys that I knew, they wouldn't tell you about it. There's always the old saying, like, you want to know, you got to go. Yeah. You're like, wait, what's selection like? What's selection like? And you're like, you want to know, you got to go. So it's kind of like keeping that mystery there. So, just seeing what those guys are capable of doing, you're going to ruck, you're going to run, and you're just going to get just hammered with push-ups, pull-ups, carrying logs and that kind of thing. So in my mind, that's what I did. Just try to replicate that. And that's
what were all your friends doing while you were doing that? Were you having to like kind of cut them off almost to a certain degree because you were training?
Kind of. I came from what's called a soft skill MOS, so like a non-combat arms MOS. So your support people, your truck drivers, your cooks, your admin people. So it's kind of unusual for a soft skilled guy to want to go do something like that. So, all my buddies, on a Friday night or Saturday night, while they're out partying, and hitting the bars and clubs and stuff, I'd go for a 25-mile ruck, or a 30-mile run or whatever it is I felt that I had to do. So all these people would be like, hey, why don't you just come have a couple drinks with us, go downtown tonight. I'm like, nope. I just, I have something planned, like a goal much bigger than what I'm doing as a truck driver guy, and kind of long-term, like setting myself up for a career in the Army. I was like, I know this is what I want to do. So going out and having fun is kind of not where my priority was, so, and there's a lot of people who got it. They're like, hey man, like, we know you can do it. Like you're one of the guys that we see who has that drive, and probably the capability to go be successful. But there's other people who are like, man, it's, you don't see guys like us, like the soft skill guys going into SF. It's just not our game, and you're not going to make it either. So using that as kind of fuel. Sure. And I had a commander, and he told me, he's like, hey, my friend went, and he's a pretty high speed guy, and he didn't make it. So I don't know about you, and I was like, no problem, sir. Like, so taking all that negativity and really just turning that into like fuel, especially when I got to selection, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm here for myself, first of all. But I kind of want to, pass so I can kind of like shove it in their faces. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So, that was kind of like how that evolved into like my formation and preparation to be, going to selection.
And then when you were in selection, how'd that go?
It was good.
Hardest thing you ever did, or?
I mean, there were certainly very challenging parts of selection. A lot of it's mystery. Like, you just didn't know. And a lot of it's by yourself. So there's no instructions other than they tell you, there's a whiteboard. And so they say, the rule is like, check the whiteboard. So you're constantly sending people to the whiteboard to look for instructions. And you just never know what was going to happen. There was, like I said, some things I found to be pretty easy, but there are some things I was like, man, this is kind of next level for me, difficulty wise. But I liked the parts where I was by myself. It's like a simple set of instructions, a rucksack, a map and a compass, and they're like, this is what you got to go do it. Don't talk to anybody. We'll see you when we see you. And so for me, to being out, growing up a little bit in the woods, we'd go hunt and stuff like that, or just go up in the mountains. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. This is kind of what I like. Kind of move at my own pace. I didn't have to worry about helping someone or someone getting behind. I was just like, just set it and forget it. And just go as fast as you can, as far as you can. And hopefully you're doing the right thing. So like in that regard, I thought it was really fun.
So was there ever a point in selection you're like, oh shit, man, I don't know if I got this, dude?
I mean, you don't know. I mean, mentally, I think I was like, man, I think I'm doing the right things. I'm doing what they want me to do. And I didn't want to leave room for doubt in my mind. So it was like, just keep going. No matter how hard or ambiguous it gets, like, just do what they tell you to do. Don't really question it and do your best. I figured these people know what they're looking for in a candidate, and that's their job, is to assess. SFA has the Special Forces Assessment and Selection. So they're there assessing people. At the end of the day, they're going to select the right people who they believe are a right fit for the regiment. So, it was just one less thing for me to think about. It's like, you know what, do what they tell you to do the best you can. And if you're at the end of the selection course and you made it, then you did what you're supposed to do. And if not, at least you tried, because you hear it all the time in the Army. Like, oh man, I was going to do this, or I was going to go to selection, but, there's always an excuse. So I didn't want to be one of those guys. I was like, I could at least say I went and tried. And if they didn't select me or I didn't make it, I can say I tried. Versus most people, they won't even show up. Right. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. Like anything, you got to show up. If you show up, like, that's the first step.
Right. There's no what if.
Exactly.
Yeah. Out of all the lessons in the military, what stuck out to you the most?
Out of all, man, there's so many.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest takeaways that I learned, especially going through Special Forces, is the value of teamwork. Me being able to rely on someone else who has the discipline to put in the work and do what they're supposed to do, and count on them to do what they're supposed to do, just like they're counting on you to be there for them, using the discipline that it took to get to that spot. So, I think being on a team like that, it's kind of implied that that person has discipline. They have the mental fitness and the fortitude, the physical fitness level that's required to go do, whatever it is you're tasked to do. And so all those attributes come from being a good teammate, because if you let yourself kind of get off task, it's going to hurt the team. You lose that discipline, it's going to hurt the team. It could get someone killed. So I think taking away of like just remembering what it is to be a good teammate and being on a team with a shared mission, a shared purpose. So letting yourself fail to be a good teammate, it's probably one of the worst things that, as a special forces guy, it's one of the things that you can't get behind the power curve. And then you get a bad reputation, like, oh, this guy's just, he's not a good team guy. They're going to move you off of an A team to go do something else, and everyone strives to be on an A team. So the way to stay on an A team is be a good team guy, be a good listener, be a good leader, be a good follower too. So all those things are, I think, incredibly important, but it all comes from like the concept of team.
Do you think you learned that like from playing sports or your time in military?
It's probably both.
Yeah.
Like playing T-ball, up until adult league baseball, before I joined the Army, was team. Everyone contributes something. You got a great pitcher. This guy's a great, leadoff hitter. And it all contributes to success. So taking those kind of principles and then going through basic training where they're breaking everyone down and building up a team, to graduate basic training and go on to the next event in the military and training. It all comes from the team concept.
What was your proudest moment when you were in the military?
Man, probably my proudest moment in the military. That's a good question. It's hard because I had a lot of great moments. And I think probably for me was the day I retired. Looking back and knowing that I gave everything I could for the country, while wearing uniform. I took the assignments. I volunteered for all the training, like the be all you can be mentality of the old school Army. It was like, be all you can be for the country. And so I look back, almost 16 years of service, I was like, man, I accomplished a lot more than I thought I would. That's for sure. Especially with the wars going on, deployed all over the world, with a great bunch of men and women. I was like, I look back on those days and I was like, man, I'm really proud of that.
Absolutely.
There's great days and there's bad days, in the military is like any other job. So, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I look back and I'm really proud of that.
As you should be, man.
Oh, thank you.
You're a hell of a dude, man. All right, let's walk me through November of 2012.
Yeah, so November 2012, I was a newly promoted Chief Warrant Officer, second class, on Special Forces A team. We'd been assigned to go deploy to southern Kandahar in Afghanistan. So excited. Been on this team for maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years. And so great bunch of Green Beret guys. Excited to get back into combat because we've been deploying, to Latin America and doing some other stuff. So I couldn't help it. I loved being in combat. It's an exciting part of our job that we got to go do. So we're looking forward to the mission. We think it's pretty straightforward. It's called Village Stability Operations. It was like the big thing that was going on at the time, just getting in, being embedded with the village, getting these folks security minded, and kind of that was like the big mission set at the time. So kind of the foreign internal defense, typical special forces mission. You're living with the locals, you're working with them, you're speaking their language, and you're going out and you're helping them. And so we're ready to do that. And then the last minute, change of mission comes down. So I get the call, and me being a warrant officer, and the special forces team is designed to be split in half with the capabilities. We have 2 weapons guys, 2 explosive guys, 2 medics, 2 radio guys, that kind of thing. So if you need to, you can split and still have, the capability to for each job, each MOS. So go into planning, and I'm taking half the guys with me to go to this one outpost that we're really kind of setting up. The team that was there we're replacing, they just started setting it up, so there wasn't much going on as far as infrastructure wise and kind of getting a feel for the land. So we get down there, and it's the Wild West. I mean, we're taking recoilless rifle fire, indirect fire every day, direct fire every day. We're getting ambushed, follow on after we take these rounds, and they're landing. It's effective right in our base, like every single day. This is happening. Then we get ambushed, so we're, these guys are out for us. It's a pretty intense area. So we're trying to figure out, getting ourselves situated, and dealing with waiting for a partner for us. We have Afghans we're waiting for them to come and join us. Still no word on those guys, but it's it was a hard fought first couple months there in country, but it was an opportunity for us to go find people and put in the work. So we're like, okay, this is why part of the reason we're here. Like, we can go eliminate these terrorists. So there was plenty of work, and we were located right between Helmand and Panjwai, which is like historically, probably since the beginning of that country's time. You look back at every conflict or war that's been fought in Afghanistan, you're going to hear Helmand, you're going to hear Panjwai. So just historically not good places. I mean, that's where people go to fight, and that's exactly what was going on. So, and then November.
Real quick, is that like mountainous terrain or
desert?
Desert.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly mountains around there, but it's mostly desert. You get northern Kandahar, you're starting to climb up in the mountains a little bit for sure, but in that specific area, I mean, there's like some dune sea. You kind of look out and you can see the dunes and just desert, just kind of a barren wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
The mud hut's been there forever. So that's kind of the terrain. You have some, some farmland and stuff like that where there's some rivers that run through there, but for the most part, it's just flat desert. So, but we were just doing what we were supposed to do, go out and patrol. We got hit, or actually we went out to do a raid on a compound, November 28th. Went out there, did what we're supposed to, had a great little hit. And then we come back and it's nighttime, so it's kind of like, hey, we got to stop because we were finding so many IEDs all over the place. It was kind of just bananas. So we go to make a security halt for the night, and then my truck hits an IED, rips the front half of that truck off. I mean, it's a miracle, like, we survived. But so we, that put a halt to our movement for that night. So the next day, we had to wait for recovery vehicle.
Y'all were unscathed at that moment, though.
No, I mean, I got knocked out. Combat controller guy behind me, he got knocked out, busted up his face. But other than that, like, that was it. The driver and the guy behind him were like, they got their bells rung too. But thank God nobody was hurt. So the next day we're kind of waiting around for tow truck to come get us, recover us, and so we're sitting around. We're like, hey, let's just go assess the situation. So we go out, we're taking pictures and kind of seeing like the aftermath of what had happened the night before, and we're talking to some of the locals. And so, they're like, oh, of course, we didn't hear nothing. Like, how could you not hear anything? It's like, oh, truck got ripped in half by this IED. So, so we're sitting there looking and just trying to engage with people and just kind of figure out what's going on. And one of the team guys finds a guy that we'd been kind of looking for. And so, I get a radio call like, hey, Chief, we got this guy over here, and, I'm like, take him into one of the little sheds and, like, let's detain him and separate him and we'll deal with him here in a few minutes. So I went back to one of the trucks to make a radio call to headquarters and kind of give them an update. And next thing you know, George, our medic, I tell George, like, hey, go over there with this other guy, Carlos, and I'll be right there. So George is going to go check him out and kind of over there pull security a little bit. And I start walking back to my truck. My truck was wrecked. So I'm going back to a truck with a radio. And I'm walking through a field, and I just had this sensation of just to stop. And I looked down, straight down at my feet. And I'm like, man, and I had some stuff in this hand that I recovered, and I had my rifle in this hand. I'm like, man, something's not right. It's like that sixth sense, So I'm just looking around, and like historically, you can kind of see where they put IEDs down. There's certain telltale signs for sure, and I just didn't see any of it. And when I was enlisted, I was an engineer on a team, so I was a demo guy. So I was the guy that was blowing up IEDs, and taking them apart or rendering them safe and stuff like that. So I knew what I was doing, typically. And I'm like, man, I just don't see those signs. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, well, I got to go call the boss. I got to give him an update. And we got to go deal with this guy we had just found. So as soon as I stepped forward and I put my left foot down, it was like the pop bang. I knew exactly what happened. I was like, man, I just stepped on the IED. And so immediately, like, you just kind of go into like your training, like anything. It's like you start to work through that process. And that's exactly what happened.
So did it like blow you several feet?
I don't know. It blew me back, and like there's a little crater and stuff like that. I don't think it was quite several feet, but it definitely put me down for sure. And I don't know because, I couldn't see. Both eyes were ripped open, severely lacerated. Couldn't see. Initially, my left foot was gone. So just the foot, but my right leg had just been flayed open. So that was a real problem. Lost part of my finger, my thumb was almost gone. Big hole in my forearm here. So there was quite a few things for George and this guy Carlos to come and start, assessing and getting to work. So
were you like bleeding out?
Yeah. I didn't feel it at first, but like initially I was like, okay, you stepped in the ID. First thing you need to do is find your rifle. So I'm like trying to like figure out what's going on. Couldn't find it. Things probably just blown off into the distance. Couldn't find it. Like, okay, find your tourniquets and apply your tourniquets. I'm trying to work through that. Couldn't find them. My hands weren't working. Burnt. Stuff like that. So couldn't find my tourniquets. And so I was like, man, the next thing you do is like stay awake. Like don't go to sleep. And so in my mind, I was like, just call for George. So I was like calling for George. Like obviously, like they heard an explosion. So I'm like, okay, they know something's going on, but I was like, just call him anyway. So just keep your mind busy. And so call for George, and George comes over. And like I said, we had we're chatting, so he wasn't too far away. So George comes over, and he's a special forces medic. And these guys are the best in the business. So complete confidence in his abilities in trauma, combat medicine, trauma medicine. So George comes over, and he's like, Dano, everyone calls me Dano. They're like, hey, Dano, like, and I'm like, hey, George. First question out of my mouth is like, hey, do I still got my junk? And he's like, yeah, you're good, man. And so I just remember like laying back, peace of mind. I'm like, okay, like I'm in good shape. George will fix me and do the rest. So, and then Carlos comes over, and Carlos working on my left side, pretty easy injury. I think all things considered, just the foot is gone. So, but he was cranking down some tourniquets, and I remember like, oh man, it hurts so bad. And he's like, I know it hurts, Chief, but you got to stop the bleeding. I'm like, I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you it hurts, and he was just cranking down. You got to stop the bleeding. And, and it's, anyone's ever had a tourniquet applied to him, it's not pleasant, but he's doing his job. He saved my life. Him and George, both saved my life that day. And I could tell by George's voice that like I was in pretty bad shape. Mm-hmm. And so realizing this, I was like, man, just talk to him. And that's what I did. It's like just telling him, making small talk. It's like, hey, George, make sure the guys in the back are pulling security by the Taliban chicken farm. and make sure these guys are doing this, and whatever. And he's like, yeah, man, we got it, and I knew those guys, they know what to do. They were just firing on autopilot. Everyone knows their job. But in my mind, I was like, this is just me staying awake. That's all I can do. And just try to keep him calm. Like having a conversation like we are, like voices just calm. And that was my job. Be a good patient and keep him calm and stay awake. You know what I mean? So that's what I tried to do. And so, yeah, just working through that. But at a certain point, though, I do remember feeling, I was like, man, I'm just losing a lot of blood. I could feel my body shutting down. So there's a guy, Brandon, our demo guy, our engineer on the team, great guy. And I was like, man, tell Brandon to come over here. And so Brandon comes over and I was like, man, I want you to bring me home. I can just feel my body shutting down. I was like, man, I'm going to die. And so, that was a heavy thing to put on someone. But we're all ready for it. If someone asked me, if he was in my spot or someone else was in my spot and they asked me to do it, like without hesitation, I was like, yeah, man, like, I'll, like hang on and fight, man. But, I will get you home one way or the other. So that's, I asked Brandon that, and I was like, man, just bring me home. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't going the way, like we're all hoping it would. But so I could feel like that blood loss and just the body's natural way of just trying to hang on. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, it was fast, like how fast that happened, like in as mentally focused as I thought I was of like just trying to stay awake and just trying to do those things. The body's going to do what the body's going to do, even though I was trying to keep my mind mentally just like engaged.
Wow.
But, yeah, but before you know it, like our combat controller guy from the Air Force, great guy. He had a Black Hawk helicopter coming, in no time, and Brandon goes out and clears a landing zone, an improvised landing zone. And, I just remember like the last thing I remember from that point, the point of injury was getting a space blanket thrown over me because they're like, hey, the bird's inbound, and obviously keep as much dirt and dust out of my wounds as possible. This thing just going over my face, and I was just like, like, hey man, I can't breathe. You know what I mean? So, still trying to have some fun with, with as much fun as I guess you could at that point in time. So, and then just getting loaded. I could hear the crew chief and George and the guys giving a patient handover. Like here's what's going on, here's what we did, and here's how long tourniquet's been on, and all that kind of stuff, and just getting loaded into a medevac bird. So, and then
they took you where?
Kandahar airfield. So it wasn't too far. Like we'd drive to Kandahar airfield, and we'd be there maybe an hour and a half. Depends. You got to go through the city and stuff like that. So by a helicopter, as a crow flies, I mean you could be there in 20 minutes, maybe something like that, less than 20 minutes. So, like I said, just grace of God, there was a bird right there, and they just got me loaded, and off the X, and then from that point on, like I just remember once getting in the bird, I was like, man, like just breathing real heavy, and then it was just lights out, and it turns out I was dead for a while, for a good portion of that flight.
Wow.
Going to Kandahar. And it's funny because when I just remember this whole near-death experience that happened to me was incredible. I mean, it's hard to explain. Like the sights, the colors, and everything, like you can't explain it. It's really hard. And I've listened, since then I've been really kind of hesitant to do it, but I've listened to other people talk about their near-death experiences also. And there's so many similarities, like where you listen to these people talk about it. And I guess I'll just tell you about it if you want me to.
Absolutely.
When I remember feeling myself shut down, and I was like, yeah, this is it. Like I just had this sensation of like traveling like upward, and I couldn't see, like this first person view, of course, but I couldn't see anything. Like I couldn't put my hands up for, anything like that. And and I knew what was happening consciously. I was like, man, I'm dead. And so just traveling, no sense of time or speed, so I was just going up. That's all I could figure what was happening. And then I could see a light, the brightest, purest white light I've ever seen. And I can't describe how pure and bright it was, but I could still look at it. And it had like this sensation of peace. And a few months before we deployed, one of our weapons guys on our team, his name is Jose Jaquez, he was killed in San Antonio. And so caught us all, we're all on leave, and it's just a tragedy. And he passed, and he was murdered. And I could see, as I got closer to this white light, I could see Jose's face in it. Like it was crazy. But it was like he was happy. Like it was very peaceful. And he was just smiling. And he's such a great dude. And I could see his face. And immediately, like this sensation of peace. And, I'm like, man, I don't know what this means, but like, I'm not scared. And I guess before this, like I'd made peace with God, and I wasn't like a big believer. I mean, I believed in Jesus and there's God and stuff like that. But I remember when they were working on me, George and Carlos were working on me, and the guys were getting ready to transfer me for the bird. I just remember telling God, it's like, hey, like if, you allow me to come home, like, like I'm yours, you know what I mean? So that was kind of like my peace prayer, like going into the unknown. I'm like, I don't know what happens next, but like, God, if you're listening to me, like I'm ready to like, if you'll have me come home, like I'm ready to come home. So, and I just remember saying like, well, I said it and let's just see what happens. And then, like I said, fast forward a few minutes later and I'm having this experience. And I just remember looking at Jose, and I don't know how long, like I said, I had no concept of time, but getting so close to Jose, like I said, I could see his face. Even though it was like I said, a purest form of light I've ever seen before. And then all of a sudden I felt like the most terrifying feeling that I've ever had. And I just remember seeing like kind of like tentacles coming around trying to get me, from Jose. And I was terrified. And it was like, I don't know if it was like a monster or a demon or something trying to reach me, but it was trying to pull me down. I was like, man, this thing's trying to like take my soul like to hell. And it was the blackest black I've ever seen in my life. Like you could go out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night with no illumination, no starlight or nothing like that, and still not even be compared to like how black this was. And I just remember being absolutely terrified. And like fear just was like washed over me. But Jose like never faltered. Like he was smiling, And I was just like, man, this guy's protecting me. Like he is keeping that demon or whatever that was away from me. He's protecting me. His death saved my life. And I was just like, man, just at peace. And there was no talk, like I couldn't speak, but like we could like communicate. It was just a strange thing. And I wasn't afraid, at that point I was like, man, this is it, and then, but I felt myself like getting distance, like I was going backwards, and there was space created, and then it was like, and it was done. And I remember waking up, and the crew chief, when we got to Kandahar.
You're still in the Black Hawk?
I'm still in the Black Hawk. Door opens, and I think it was because it's early in the morning. Door opens, I think like, even though I couldn't see, like that light off of the concrete was like blinding to me. And the crew chief opens the door. He's like, hey, he's back. He's awake. He's like, hey, do you know where you are? And the only thing I could think of was the Guns N' Roses song, Welcome to the Jungle, where he's like, in the middle of the song, like in the bridge or wherever, he's like, do you know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby. You're going to die. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, man, like, say it. You know what I mean? Like, let him know that you're awake. But, I'm like, yeah, man, I'm in Kandahar. He's like,
oh, you didn't say it?
I didn't say it. But like, I wanted to so bad. That's the first thing I thought of. So, but I was like, you know what? Like, and I was still conscious enough to be like, hey, this is probably a serious situation. Like, and this happened in seconds. It's like, hey, this is a pretty serious situation. Probably like just tell this guy, because assessing my conscious level and all this stuff, And so I'm like, yeah, I'm in Kandahar, And he's like, all right, get him out of here. So they did the patient transfer at the Kandahar Roll 3, which is like the big hospital on the main base of Kandahar Airfield. And so from that point on, like just in surgeries, and these guys are trying to keep me alive and all that stuff. So yeah, that was like point of injury to getting me to Kandahar. And so much happened like within that short span of time. But, I look back at that moment when I had that near-death experience. I didn't want to come back. Like it didn't matter to me. I was like, man, the peace I felt in the calm and the love, I was like, man, this is like real. I was like, I don't care about like my earthly body or my, my family or my friends. I was like, this is just like a temporary thing for me, for people. I didn't want to come back. I was like, man, this is like the amount of joy and, like I said, peace and everything that comes like with that. I was like, man, this is like nothing I've ever experienced. Wow. You can't describe it. I believe this, like having lived through it, I was like, man, each one of us will face that time when our time is called, when we get called home. And I was like, man, it's until then, like I'm going to try to be the best person I can be until my time is, but I was like, I look forward to it. I'm not afraid, you know what I mean? Because it's a mystery, like what happens when we die. So I'm like, man, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but I was like, man, like I kind of know, like I've experienced, like to a certain point. And I was like, it's probably the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, So I was like, wow. I'm not afraid. I am afraid of like the, whatever that entity was that was trying to take me, like down, trying to, what I think was hell. Like I'm afraid of that for sure, because it was nothing like I've ever experienced before, like that terror. But yeah, that was the beginning of my journey as to where I am today, as an amputee. And that was 2012, and it's 2025 now. So, I've had some time to kind of, get my life in order and make the adjustments, and so.
So now you're in recovery mode. What was the hardest part of recovery?
Hardest part of recovery for me was trying to stay in bed, because I was determined. I was like, I want to get back to combat. I want to get better. I want to get a prosthetic leg, and I need to go back. Like there's a sense of being a good teammate, especially being in charge. I was the commander of our split team, and so for me, I was like, man, I got to get back to the boys. Like I have to, you know what I mean? So trying to listen to a doctor is like, hey man, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and the frustrations of having surgeries, like over and over and over. 20 plus surgeries. Dealing with infections, like I just couldn't wait to get past all that, which was hard because I spent a few months, I guess, like not being able to get out of bed, until I could get discharged to go do rehab. So you're just laying in bed, and I had an unknown infection that was just spreading, and that's what took most of my leg. Was they didn't know what it was, so they didn't know how to treat it. So they were trying to administer all these drugs, wait for results from the lab. But meanwhile, they're like, we can't wait because it's spreading and you're dying. And so they're like, got to do another amputation. Got to do another amputation on my left side. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just keep me alive was always the theme. And then on my right side, they were like, hey, we'll cut your leg off, and you're not going to be able to use it. It's wrecked. You lost so much muscle and nerve and all this tendon damage. Or like, you just cut it off right now. And I was like, give me a chance. I was like, if it doesn't work out, then we'll deal with it when, that time comes. But, yeah, just not being a good patient, because I was impatient, because I was like, I gotta get back to the war, so like having that fire, which was good because that's what kept me going, and even though I was on a ton of meds and just I was in really bad shape. But that to me was the hardest part, because once I got discharged, at the Center for the Intrepid here at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston, seeing the building, you could see it from the hospital. And so like, that's where you're going. That's where the magic happens. Once we get you stable, you're getting a prosthetic, there's a gym there, and they'll teach you everything you need to know about being an amputee. And so knowing that, I was like, man, I got to get out of here. So, I would when I was able to get out of my bed and transfer to a wheelchair, I kind of like go around the floor as exercise, kind of get out of the room, and you'd see kind of like which nurse was on duty. And you kind of size them up and they weren't paying attention. And I'd just make a run for it. I'd jailbreak, I'm dragging wound vacs out. I have like tubes all over the ground.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd go to, like a movie, like go into the elevator and like smashing the button like a million times, looking around and seeing if someone's going to catch you, and you go out and you just go out to the hospital, which was crazy. But, you quarter mile down the road, you got to cross, a road to get there, and there's cars everywhere, and I don't know how I did it, but I just, that's all I knew. It's like my motivation. I was like, I got to get strong. I got to get a leg, and I need to get back to the war. And so like it took everything I had to get over to the hospital, to the rehab center. And a guy named Mark found me the first time. I had a beard still, longer hair. And he's like, dude, what are you doing here? And looked at my wristband for patient ID. And he's like, you can't be here, man. Like, he's like, how did you get here? And I was like, I'm here to get jacked and tan, and I need a leg. Like he's like, all right, man. So he gave me a tour, just motivation, like something to look forward to. Like, hey, man, you're going to be here, but you cannot be here until you get better, right? So go back to, to 4 West, the floor I was on, and just do what you need to do there until you can be here. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, well, like no problem. And then I broke out again, because I was like, man, I want to be here. So determined. But it took a while. Like I said, like I don't even know, like it was over 20 amputations, and just having a conversation where they're like, hey, we're below knee is where you want to be, through knee is not a bad place to be, and above knee is not where we want to go. And Colonel Gasky, my ortho surgeon, he came up, and I could see the look on his face. He was about to drop it on me, and he was like, hey, Dan, we got to go above knee. And I was like, sir, just keep me alive. I'll figure out the rest. And I didn't know anything about adaptive lifestyle or anything like that, but in my mind, I'm like, there's guys who are running and doing these incredible things as adaptive athletes and all this other stuff, so I was like, I'll figure that out. But I was like, you need to keep me alive. And after a while, they got it under control, no more amputations, and they're like, hey, you can get discharged and you go to the Center for the Intrepid and start your process there. So, and that from that point on, it was a pretty easy transition to get fitted for a prosthetic and get walking, and just, I took it literally just one step at a time of like, okay, this is a good step. This is a good fit, and then like, this is a good step, and this is what a good step feels like and it looks like, and just, I took it really slow.
So yeah, you had to relearn how to walk, everything.
Mm-hmm. And my skin graft was so large, and they're like, hey, well, on my right leg, and they said, well, we don't typically see these things take, so this might be a process in itself. So be prepared for that. But, grace of God, man, it took one and done.
Wow.
And yeah, I think mentally I would tell myself, because they'd put like this, I think it's called zero form, like a webbing material over your leg. And the guy would come in, he'd be like, hey, you can, from the burn center, he'd be like, hey, you can start peeling it back. And when it bleeds, stop. So it became like a game to me. Like
would you soak it or anything?
No, it was just how it was. And so I'd just peel it, and it'd bleed, I'd stop. Find somewhere else, peel it. And so it became a game, like how much can I get every day? And eventually it all gone, and they're like, man, this is like phenomenal. We've never seen anything like this, But mentally, I would just tell myself, I was like, man, you can do it. Like, your body's strong. Like you can heal. You know what I mean? Like that positive mental attitude.
Absolutely. And
like reinforcing my own body. It's like, man, you can do it. Like just stay positive. You just stay positive. And I think that helped, at least in my mind, like that, like having a positive mental attitude instead of like shutting down, like really, helped the healing process of my body, just like staying sharp and staying, trying to eat and get my body stronger. So I could get out of there legally, without breaking out. So, but yeah, and I just ended up at the Center for the Intrepid, the CFI, and just started my, like a kid, you're just like a baby, you got to learn to walk, figure out what your new normal is. And I did it all there. So
yeah, there's a lot of what you just said, like I know for myself, like what I focus on grows. And I like to say your focus is your master. You know, if I'm focusing on the negative's going to grow. If I'm focusing on the positive's going to grow. That's exactly what you did. You focused on healing and you know, one take, one and done on the skin graft, and they were telling you, hey, we're going to have to cut it off. So that's pretty amazing testimony right there, man.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it's just like the human mind is so fascinating, you know, and it's so powerful. And it's one of those things, it's like, man, you can't underestimate it.
Right.
Because I think it's drives us, you know, to really maximize like what we can do as a person. You know, it's like in between the years, that's where it lives.
Absolutely. So during your recovery, did you ever hit a point to where you're like, man, I don't think I can do this?
Well, I think my lowest point in my recovery was when I got discharged from the hospital. Got transferred into you know, a vehicle, and we at the time we were living in Cibolo, Texas. Just like my first time going home. And so my right leg's kind of in a trough still, you know, so it's like out, you know, still trying to heal. I didn't know anything about adaptive lifestyle other than like, okay, you go to a business that's got a ramp for people in wheelchairs. You know, like you have grab bars in the restroom. Like that's as far as I knew, because I just never really had to be accustomed to that. So we get into a rental home, and I remember I was like, man, like trying to be a tough guy, you know, don't need a caregiver or anything like that, and just I can do it mentality by myself, which wasn't a good approach to it. And start to shower, and it's not like an open base shower, you know, it's got the little, you know, glass, you know, and not ideal for a person in a wheelchair. And I just remember I couldn't get in. You know, I told my wife, I was like, no, let me do it. You know, it's kind of like my first start is like being an independent, you know, person as an amputee. And I just remember, like, it broke me down. Like day one, trying to take a shower, a basic function, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it by myself, I guess I should say. And I just remember it crushed me. I cried. And I was like, man, like I can't even take a shower, you know? And I was like, you know, I was like, look, if you need to cry, like have a cry. But I was like, don't ever feel sorry for yourself again. Like this is life. So, you know, like I just let it out. All that frustration and things I was dealing with, you know, I was like, man, just get it out and just like start over, you know, but like you can't do it by yourself. And so that from that point on, and then I think it's perspective too, you know, I was like, man, I've seen guys die right in front of my face in combat, all kinds of stuff, you know, and I was like, man, I'm here, you know what I mean? I get to be here. I'm not in a grave somewhere in Arlington, you know, or anywhere like that. So I was like, man, you gotta figure it out, and you gotta stay strong and be grateful that you're alive. So that was like the low point, getting out of the hospital, where I realized like my life had changed. Like it had become real, because in the hospital you have people tending to you. You have nurses and you know, family members and friends come and help you out and stuff like that. But now it's like, man, it's like a transition point where I'm like, okay, like I got to self-care here a little bit. And man, it knocked me down. That's for sure. So
I'm going to backtrack a little bit. What was it like the first time you saw your kids after this happened?
Oh, it was awesome. You know, they were little. And it was like December of 12, holiday season. You know, they just been uprooted from Florida where we were living. We're out stationed. You know, like they see me, I got a beard, tubes everywhere, you know what I mean? Like one leg's gone. They got to wear like, you know, gowns, you know, like as I'm in a intensive care unit type environment. So, yeah, big morale boost for sure, you know, seeing my family. But, you know, I look back and they were young. They were scared. There was only one of my kids that I remember. His name was Elvis. Elvis would come and he'd climb on the bed like nothing happened. And he's like, what's up? You know, where the other kids, they were kind of standoffish, you know, especially my girls, you know, which crushed me. Mm-hmm. You know, and I remember one time it just broke down. because they wouldn't come in. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted was like them to come in and like play with me, let me like talk to them, but they wouldn't come through the threshold of the door. I just remember telling people, I was like, just everyone get out, it just broke me. And so, just frustrated and angry. But I was like, man, they're little kids, they don't recognize me. I've never been around them with like a beard and hair, longer hair and obviously like stuff everywhere. So I was like, man, you can't be mad at them because like, this is new to them and they're so young. But like the first time I was seeing them, I was like, man, this is cool. You know what I mean? Like I get to see these kids, I get to be here. But it wasn't easy. Like eventually they kind of like became normal. So they would come in and like, became easier on them. But that's all I craved. I was like, man, I just want them to come up to me and hug me and just like watch TV together or just kind of like horse around on the bed and stuff like that. But it took a while for that to happen. So, but I was grateful for when that, like I said, it kind of eased into it a little bit and certainly made my recovery better.
So before we met, what kind of physical challenge had you taken on?
So before you and I met, I was into, just still had that competitive spirit. I was like, man, like still want to be tested. It's like kind of like the special forces mentality of like, man, I want to be the best. I want to push myself to the limits. Adaptive sports, certainly had a hand in that, like figuring out how to be an adaptive athlete, whether that was like track and field, adaptive surfing, even just walking, like hiking and stuff like that. So, like doing things I never thought, wheelchair basketball, like something that sounds so easy. Like I was like, man, this is pretty hard. So doing CrossFit is like an adaptive athlete, one leg is doing like wall balls, squats, with one leg. And I was frustrated because like people were crushing me, and the guy was like, man, you're doing pretty good, but he's like, dude, you gotta realize you're on one leg that's tore up.
So you're in a gym with all adaptive amputees?
I'm the only guy. You know what I mean? So I'm still competing with these people because I'm like, man, I can beat at least one person here. You know what I mean? So, but it was frustrating. But I didn't realize it. Like one of the guys was like, hey man, like you got to realize you're keeping up with one leg. That's like it's in really bad shape. But like don't let that get you down. If you need to change the way you approach a workout of the day or whatever, like you got to be able to do that so you don't just continue to wreck yourself and you don't come for a day or two. So I was always looking for something, and that led to like the military Paralympic Games. Just being a part of a team again, and looking to compete, and that's what I did. So any sport they would let me try out for, I was doing it. So and like again, it's kind of discovering what my new normal is. So that's what I did, doing those kind of things. And then trying out for the, it was called Invictus Games, which is like the coalition of military adaptive kind of Paralympics. So made Team USA, there's like 90 of us for the first ever games, I think 2014. So finagled my way onto the Team USA somehow. Went over to England and competed over there and medaled in wheelchair basketball. Had an awesome time. Just kind of like said, just that reigniting that competitive spirit, man, you can do these things. You've accepted this challenge. You sought out a challenge, you've accepted it, and you're doing it. So just setting goals and things like that. And, tried jujitsu. I used to love doing jujitsu. That's been a struggle for me still. I don't really do it anymore, but I miss it. But I think it's kind of like a bridge too far sometimes. Mm-hmm. But just finding, like rucking, you know what I mean? Something I used to do all the time. I'm like, man, I can do this still. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be extreme. Like, back in the old days, you're carrying 75 pounds or 80 pounds of stuff, and going up and down mountains. I was like, 15 pounds, go do whatever you need to do, stay active, keep your mind sharp, and give you the confidence knowing that if you had to, you could trek across somewhere with weight and be okay. So, that's kind of the things that led me to Project Grit. So, just seeking challenges and gaining confidence. All those things built my confidence up, where I can be like, hey, I think I can do this, or I know I can do this now. What's next?
So how did you first hear about Project Grit?
So I heard about Project Grit maybe in January of 25 of this year. It must have been. Just on Instagram, new to Instagram and kind of just looking for ways to, I don't know, explore the internet, I guess, of like just whatever the internet offers. So I'm on Instagram, and it's strange how it happened, because I'm like, I love music to this day. I still like, it's one of my favorite things to kind of keep me going. So, totally unrelated to Project Grit. I'm looking up like Brian Setzer and Dwight Yoakam and all my favorite musicians, guitar companies and stuff like this, to kind of see what they're up to and all that stuff. And then I just see like a suggested connection, Project Grit. And I was like, man, the name sounds pretty cool. It's got a cool logo. I was like, I'm going to see what this is. And, click on it, go to the website, and I see it's like, man, like this is kind of right up my alley, like pushing yourself to see, what you're capable of. Of course, rucking, I'm like, I kind of ruck around my neighborhood, short distances, like 2 or 3 miles, maybe a 5 miler. It's like, yeah, let's see what this is all about. And so I saw the Immortal 32 was coming up, the 75-mile road march from Gonzales, Texas to the Alamo. And I was like, man, I think I can do this. And like, it's crazy because people are like, dude, you're an idiot. I'm like, why would you? I don't even want to do this. I'm an able-bodied person. My buddies are telling me this, and I'm like, I can't help it. You know what I mean? Like, this is like a challenge. And there's a bunch of people who are like, dude, you can't do this. Like, it's not possible for, an above-knee amputee who's just right leg is barely hanging on. They're like, there's able-bodied men and women who can't do this. Of course, to me, I'm like, okay, like I'm a challenge accepted. So, yeah, I just started rucking and training, and then I reached out to you, and I was like, hey man, like, I'm working towards this, you know what I mean? But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm gonna do this. As long as like my right leg holds up, there's no reason for me not to even try. And so that's how I found Project Grit, and is, like I said, cool name, cool logo. Check it out. I'm like, yeah, man, this is my kind of people who like to punish themselves and push themselves, and it's like a special tribe, that exists. Like, people have that common mentality. I was like, man, these are my kind of people. I can tell already. And so, I think we had chatted just briefly, like, you're like, hey, who are you, man? Like, are you going to do this or not? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a couple more rucks to build up mileage. And if I feel good, like, I'm in. And then did the Rise and Ruck in Wimberley, first time that we'd met.
Hold on, I want to go in, because, interrupt you. I remember getting an invite, and you sent me a message, and I'm like, who the hell is this 3/4 cowboy? What the hell's a 3/4 cowboy? That was your handle on Instagram. And so I dove in and started looking at all the pictures, and I'm like, hold on, this dude has one leg and he's riding bulls? I was like, I gotta meet this guy, because I love rodeo. I grew up rodeos when I was a kid. I'm an 8th generation Texan, and so I'm like, I gotta see who this dude is. Then we started chatting, and pretty much every time I'm like, yeah, show up to, if they're local, show up to Rise and Ruck and see. And then if they show up, I know they're probably somewhat serious. And yeah, you showed up to Rise and Ruck, and I knew a little bit of your backstory, and I was like, man, if he thinks anybody asks me if they think they can do the 75 miles, my first question back to them is, do you think you can? Because that's what it boils down to, like I was talking about earlier, what your focus is, And you said, I think I can. And yeah, so what was your feeling? You came to that Rise and Ruck?
Yeah, it's easy. It's like 5 miles, not a big deal. So I'm like, I think more than anything, I was looking for community. You know what I mean? Like I said, like that tribe. Like in Special Forces, you have your team, like your team, your companies, your tribe. Mm-hmm. Same guys who are driven by the same things. Reliable, dependable people. They say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. say what you mean what you say, people. And so I was like, man, this is what I need. You know what I mean? I need those kind of people around me. And so showing up, immediately people are like, oh man, who are you? Where are you from? Whatever. And so like welcoming, it's like, man, this is some great people so far. So you're out doing PT, so double bonus, staying active. And like I said, from there, I was like, okay, like I think it's a very short time to prep for 75 miles. Like this is like January, late January of this year, and the Immortal 32 was next month, it was in the end of February. So I was like, man, we can do this. We just got to figure out how to do it. Like, what's the training approach to this? And you kind of guided me in on some things I should be doing, and I'm sending you screenshots like, hey, I just did 10 miles. Am I on time, track for time wise? And you're like, hey man, just keep going. You're doing pretty good. So, and plus for me too, I was like, man, I already told this guy I'm going to do it. So like, I have to do it now. It's not like you're just like kind of like talking nonsense with like your buddies and stuff, like I was like, this dude's going to hold me accountable. Cause I was like, there's a seriousness about this guy, for sure. Now if I'm telling him I'm going to do it, like I have to do it. So, we did the Austin Marathon together. We rucked that. And that was like the first big test for me as an amputee. That was the longest I've ever walked before as an amputee. So, doing that with the rucksack, I thought we did pretty good. I didn't have any significant problems and came out feeling pretty good. So I think from that point on, I was like, yeah, I think this is, like I learned a lot from that experience. So I was like, yeah. Like I know what I got to do to be successful, to do this 3 times over. And so, that was right around the corner from the Immortal 32. So it's like, from this point, just stay healthy, do some little maintenance, rucks just to stay active. And more than anything, I was like, you got to show up. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I bet there's people that like say they're going to do this and they don't show up
all the time.
So, I was like, you show up. That's the first step towards victory. I was like, you can't back out. Don't be a punk, and show up. And I never told this guy I'm going to do it. So I was like, I'm going to do it.
So what was the hell yeah, I'm in moment?
When I messaged you, I think subliminally, I was like, I told this dude, like, hey, I'm training for this. I was like, that was like my way of saying like, hey, I'm going to do this. Even though I was kind of like, hey, I'm just going to see how I feel. I don't want to blow out my knee or something crazy. But I was like, this is my way of telling myself like, I'm going to do this. I messaged a complete stranger saying, hey, I'm interested. I think I can do this. But I was like, okay, now you've let an outsider in. Now you have to, like, you got to put in the work, you got to put in the miles, and you got to do it. So like, it was kind of like a reach to you of like, hey, push me a little bit here, like hold me accountable. And, and you were like, hey, Rise and Ruck, are you coming? All this other stuff, like extending that hand to me of like, come on. So that's what I needed. And so like, it was like a welcoming into the tribe, each time we'd connect and we'd go ruck together. I was like, man, this is, like I said, this is what I need. And this is, there's nothing stopping me except for if I don't show up.
Well, yeah, I mean, after looking into what I could figure out who Daniel Carlton was, I was like, this is one of my guys. And I knew, especially after the first couple of rucks we did, I knew that you're one of us. That I knew that you were one of us, and that I could tell you were a brother, and the more we hang out, the more we talk, more layers of the onion get peeled back. It just comes true, more and more true. So I came up with the idea. I saw that the Austin Marathon was coming up, and I was like, man, this is a perfect opportunity to do a test. We did it. You kicked ass, man. And I was kind of mind blown how well you did. I thought it was going to be a little tougher. What did you learn on that 26 mile? Because before the Austin Marathon, you had told me the furthest you had ever gone as an amputee was 15 miles. So I'm assuming there was a lot we learned or you learned on that 26-mile journey. What did you pick up from that?
I mean, it wasn't physical. So like I knew, I've been walking around as an amputee for a while. So I knew like what right was supposed to look like. You got to change your liners. You know, you feel a little skin breakdown. You got to address it right there. Because there's times in the past where you try to push through it. You know, I'm like, man, like I'll just keep going. But I was like, you pay for it in the end. Like I'll be in a wheelchair for, you know, a day or two because I let myself get out of control with injuries. And so I think I knew what that looked like. So physically. But what I learned that day is we had a good friend of mine I'd known for a long time, Chris Diaz, you and Carson Tinker. You know, we're the only guys who show up to do this thing. And I think just learning right there, I'm like, man, these guys have my back. You know, Chris came out from Houston. Obviously you and Carson. You know, I'd never met him before, and this dude's all about it. He's like, man, you do it. You're strong, I'm strong. You know what I mean? So I was like, man, like this community is real and is growing. So I think for me, I was like, man, having these guys around me, like they got my back, I got their back. Like there's nothing I can, you know, I know what it takes for me physically to go the next mile. But I was like mentally, man, I was like, man, I have like a real crew. You know what I mean? Like I have a crew. And so that was the huge takeaway for me. I was like, man, like, could I have done it by myself? Probably. It would have been a little bit slower. You know, it would have been more suck for sure. But I was like, man, I had these dudes, we're laughing, we're joking the whole time. You know, I was like, just like a good crew. You know, I mean, they had my back, you know, and I was just trying to keep up with you guys. So, you know, that's what the big takeaway was there. I was like, man, you got a good crew with you. Guys who were like natural born leaders. I was like, man, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think for Carson, and I suspect for you, is like first time being around an amputee, like kind of trying to figure out some things, you know what I mean? So I think it was a good way for me to kind of like share what I was going through, you know, at each mile or whatever, you know, so you guys can kind of help me along the way too. Absolutely. So. Yeah, but that's the big takeaway. It's like, man, you get a good crew, guys who believe in you. Like I said, I'd never met Carson before, but he's like, man, I believe you can do this. You know, like you can do it, like I can do it. So let's go do it. You know, and like I said, Chris, I'd known Chris for a long, long time, and so that dude was right there with me the whole way. You know what I mean? So it was a good feeling.
No, I learned a lot on it because there was a lot of questions I had. You know, I'd never really rucked with an amputee, so it's like, and you walked me through it, and which was good because then I knew what to expect. Like when we got out on the 75-miler, so I think it was a good learning experience for all of us, and that's all about preparation, you know. And like what you said though, if you got the right people around you, man, you're pretty much unstoppable, you know, and. It's just a really cool thing when you put a solid team together, you know.
What's the saying? You want to go far, go fast. What is it? What do you always say?
You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
That's it. You know, that's what it took, you know, especially for that. I mean, mentally I was like, yeah, 26 miles. Like I'm not worried. I mean, it's how you approach a challenge. You know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I was like, I can't think of the long game. Like, not even 1 mile at a time. I was like, this is literally just step after step, one step at a time. You know, it's like kind of like how I approach Special Forces selection. I was like, man, just show up, first of all, have all your paperwork ready, like go to the next thing. You know what I mean? Like do the PT test. Like don't think of it as like a PT test, you know, like all the events. It's like you're doing push-ups next, pass the push-ups. Because if you don't get past the push-ups, you go home. Mm-hmm. You know, you pass push-ups, get ready for sit-ups. You do the sit-ups. Like, so it's literally just one event at a time. Like what is next? Because if you don't get past that, you go home, like you're done. And like, I think the approach to the Austin Marathon is the same way. It's like, man, don't think about mile 5, you know, like break it down into chunks, you know, 5, 10, 15 miles or whatever. I was like, man, it's just literally just get through the next step.
Yeah, set obtainable goals. And then once you set up, next thing you know, you've accomplished 10 times what you thought you could. And I joked around, and I didn't want to discredit for it, but when we were out there, I was like, man, I bet we're the only group of people out here that are just doing this for a training event. A lot of these people, which I don't want to take away from them either, but we were just there to go train, and which was a huge accomplishment, and it was an awesome experience. Let's talk about the Immortal 32 Ruck. We talked about what you did to train to get to it. What was going through your mind? There's a really cool picture of you that someone took at the memorial. There's the reflection pond with the memorial in the background. What was going through your mind when you first showed up for that ruck at night?
When we were about to kick the event off, I mean, like the first victory was like, I'm here. Mm-hmm. That was like, and so to me, I was like, man, you're here. Like that's step one. You know what I mean? Because I look back, I'm like, man, that's a long way to walk, you know, for anybody, which is exciting to me. I'm like, man, this is still pretty cool. But, you know, I was like, hey, I'm here, you know, but like looking back at that reflection pool, you know, I was like, man, this is, you know, and I guess backing up the evening before, they had a memorial ceremony, a reenactment of kind of like those men leaving and answering the call and all that stuff. Like, especially being in the military, you think about like service and sacrifice. And, you know, looking back at that, when that picture was taken, you know, I was like, man, like these guys, you know, this is a way to honor their sacrifice, because they answered the call. The only people to answer the call to reinforce the Alamo. And they knew there's no doubt in my mind, they knew they were going to their death. And so to honor their legacy and their sacrifice for independence and freedom, man, that's a big ask, you know? And like, so for me, I was like, man, like you're here, do this in memory of them. You know what I mean? It's not about me. It's not about, you know, like I said, it's certainly not about me. Like on my mind, it's like, man, these guys, they answered the call when nobody else would. And what better way to remember them other than retracing their steps, you know, and do what those guys did, you know? So that to me was like, well, that was what I was thinking about. You know, I was like, man, these guys, you know, they paid a price, and it was a heavy price. So, you know, I was like, man, when things get bad, because they will get bad on the road, and then, you know, you're going to be tired, you're going to be hungry, all that stuff. I was like, man, just remember like what those guys paid, you know, what they paid for. So that was a big motivator for me. You know, it was like, it's not about pushing the limits as an amputee. I mean, these are certainly parts of it, but I was like, at the end of the day, man, I was like, just remember when you get to the Alamo, like when we get there, we'll be there to celebrate, you know, and have a great time together and relish in our accomplishment. But at the same time, it's like when those guys got to the Alamo, they were there like, okay,
it's just starting.
Yeah. You know, like, what do we got to do? Where can I post up? So that's what I was thinking about. Like I said, it's a cool picture. But yeah, that was a big driving factor of kind of like why each step mattered. Mm-hmm. So,
what part of the 75-mile ruck, when did it really like start to get kind of brutal for you?
Well, it was hot. Like, it was unusually hot for February.
It was. It was the hottest year that we've done it 6 times. It was definitely the hottest year that we've done it.
You know, I think, I mean, it's no different than being in the summertime for me. You know, like it changes the volume of your residual limb or your stump, whatever you call it. You know, your liner starts to slide because you're sweating. So, which means your leg starts coming off.
So real quick, explain how the prosthetic leg works.
So I have a one-way air valve. So it stays on by suction. So I have a one-way air valve. So basically it's my stump, you know, and a liner goes over that stump to prevent from rubbing onto like this hard rubber that's inside, like a rubber liner. And then you have your carbon fiber socket. So, and there's a one-way air valve. So when you slide in, you press down and all the air gets trapped and released, and then you release that button and it creates like a vacuum. Mm-hmm. So as I was walking and it was getting hot, like everything just starts shifting. So literally each step I was taking, my leg was coming off, and you could hear that suction break. You know, it's kind of like an accordion, kind of like run, 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 run. And so I had to shorten my stride and then like really focus on like, okay, legs coming off, get back in. Legs coming off, get back in. The whole way, the entire way during the day. And
So were you continuously hitting the valve, or it doesn't
no,
matter at that
there's
point?
nothing that you can do at that point, except for just like when you go to lift your leg up, you feel like that prosthetic coming off, and you slide back in. You know what I mean? So it got old real quick. But at the end of the day, I'm like, just drive on. You know what I mean? That's all you could do. So that was like my first real big problem when the sun came up and it heated up. Austin Marathon was pretty cold, so that wasn't an issue. It wasn't even a problem.
We never had that show up.
So, but it slowed me way down, big time. And it made me feel bad because I was like, man, I'm slowing down the group. Because there were some absolute monsters on the Ruck. Guys who were just crushing it, and I felt like the weak link, and like, like in special forces, you say you don't want to be last, you don't want to be light, with your Ruck. You don't want to be late. You don't want to be lost. And you don't want to be last. Those are like the 5 L's they tell you. Don't be one of these, and don't be last is on there twice because you don't want to be the last guy ever. So, I struggled with it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, it's like, man, I just feel that I'm just holding the group back. Like I'm still going, but I was like, I know the route. I'll just see when I see you guys. But you really reinforce that, like, hey man, it's not a race. We're here. We're going to start together. We're going to finish together. Like these people will wait for you. Like don't worry about that. And but I struggled with that, especially around like mile 30. I was like, dude, this is getting old real fast. We're not even halfway. You know what I mean? And I'm just felt like I was just really kind of putting the brakes on the group. But no one, at least I heard, complain to me. Like I'm sure maybe people were kind of like, oh, come on, man. Like I remember going to the house, Kimball House, and the people were chilling. And like I remember it made me feel so bad, kind of, because they're like, okay, like the break starts when the last guy gets there. So it's like, okay, 45 minutes, like Dan's here, and I'm like, sorry, but people are up there, recovery, they're taking care of themselves. I'm sure the extra 45 minutes wouldn't hurt, but I know there's people who are like, let's get on with it. You know what I mean? And I don't blame them. So that to me was a big part of like mentally, I was like, man, I feel like just a total dirtbag, holding up the group. Like, and we got to Seguin. We'd pushed through, got to the Whataburger in Seguin, and you kind of had a talk with me. You're like, hey man, like, what's up? And I was like, it was an emotional talk for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was emotional for me as well.
Because I was like, man, I just don't want to be like that guy. I've never been used to being the weak link of the group. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm struggling kind of dealing with this. Like, I have the endurance. Like, I'm not worried about that. I have the drive. But I was like, I just don't want people to like, always pointing their finger at me like, this guy, this dude's hobbling around, the last 30 miles or whatever miles we're at, like I felt bad because like I said, I never wanted to be the last guy. I never wanted to be the weak link of the team.
How'd that conversation go?
Yeah, it was good. Like, it was emotional. Like I kind of got teary eyed. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, like this self-pity or whatever you're going through. I was like, hey, make no mistake about it. I was like, I don't feel sorry for myself. I'm just frustrated. I was like, I'm going to get to the Alamo one way or the other. Like I will crawl if I have to. But I just, like I said, you always want to be a good teammate. And it comes back to the team concept. Like you can count on me, I can count on you. Let's go do whatever it is we're going to go do in confidence that we're going to get it done. But I was like, man, I'm losing confidence. And I think not in myself, but like in the team's, I think ability to accept that I'm still here, I guess. Because I think there were some people who were like, you're really slowing things down here, man. Like, can you just go away?
See, and I had a total different take on it. And what I'm saying, I'm not trying to exploit you at all, but I truly, it's not a matter of believing. I know without you on that team, we would have lost a lot more people because they're dealing with a blister or something like that, and it's like, whatever I'm dealing with, I look at you and you're dealing with 10 times that. and you're not only dealing with it, you're handling it like a true soldier, not complaining, and just hunkering down and getting the job done, dude. And it's like, I know for a fact that probably gave so much inspiration for other people. So by no means was that was a huge asset more than being a problem.
Yeah, I know you're right, because I've had people come up to me like during the walk and they're like, man, I just want you to quit so I can quit. Kind of shame, like I can't quit if this guy who's got like one leg and his other leg's just hamburger meat. Like, how would I feel if I quit and this dude finishes it? You know what I mean? So they're like, I can't do that. So I know, because I've had a couple people like during the walk, they're like, man, I wish you'd just quit, because then I would quit. And I was like, man, sorry to disappoint, but
I don't know what that word means, man.
I was like, you can quit if you want to. I don't encourage it, but like, I'm going to the Alamo. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, but I like, they appreciate that. I mean, obviously those guys finished. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure some people probably thought that, but like the guys that came up to me and told me that to my face, I was like, man, I appreciate that. You know what I mean? Because like, I got literally something from every single person on that Ruck. Like, I drew strength from them. You know what I mean? So like, I would see them keep going. I would see people like Meg, the glue that was keeping things together in so many ways. I was like, man, like, they're doing it. Like, they're putting out some real good vibes. Like, I'm just eating up, those vibes, and it's giving me the strength to kind of go on. Tinker, another guy, like, just great teammates. They demonstrated, not only them, but a lot of folks, had so many leadership traits that they were just demonstrating along the way. I don't know if they realized it or not, but I'm like, man, this is like the things that make, a great leader. It makes suffering enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Even though we're all suffering, everyone had their own thing going on for mm-hmm. sure, but it's like, man, these are the things that keep people going. Mm-hmm. They kept me going. So, all of their efforts were appreciated. And like I said, one guy's like, I don't think you can do this. He's like, I don't think, I don't want to name him, but you know who it is. It's like, I didn't think you could do this. Not because of you as a person. He's like, I just didn't know the limits of like, a person with like disabilities, like you got. So I'm like, I'm not surprised. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I appreciate your honesty, but like, let's just, and this was during the walk. This is during the Ruck. I was like, man, you got some guts to tell me that like during the Ruck, but not even afterwards of like, hey man, I'm not going to lie, but this is like during the Ruck, and I was like, I appreciate that. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm certainly not to sound conceited or anything, but I was like, I'm not your average like amputee guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a little bit dumber. Yeah. A little bit stronger than the average amputee. So, that what you see is what you get.
So did the history of the original Immortal 32, how much did that affect you during those low moments?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's like those guys they paid a price in answer to the call that nobody else would, knowing they were going to die. There's no doubt in my mind. Like, yeah, we're going to go here. We're going to do what we can to defend this, the Alamo, and for freedom and independence, if that means giving our lives, So, like I said, especially being involved in the global war on terror since the beginning of it. It's like, mm-hmm. Like that 20-year war, you learn, you see it. I lived it with those guys I was war fighting with, like what sacrifice means, leaving their families behind, not knowing if they're going to come back, or guys coming back that, with wounds and, life-changing injuries, or guys who don't come back at all, so like it's something I take a little bit more to heart. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So for me, I was like, yeah, like, don't forget what those guys did, especially living in Texas, kind of like how that shaped the history of Texas and the United States. At the end of the day, you look at like what the Battle of the Alamo, how that transformed our state. So yeah, it's just like I said, I think the Immortal 32 is a part of the Battle of the Alamo that's it's overlooked. Mm-hmm. People don't really talk about it. They just mm-hmm. think about the Battle of the Alamo and then what happened after that. So, but I think those guys definitely influenced the outcome of the battle.
The thing that always got me with their story was the guys at the Alamo, and I'm not discrediting those guys at all, but they were there. They couldn't have left if they wanted to. Where you had these 32 guys, they know that there's 174 Texans inside the Alamo, surrounded by 5,000. And like you said, there's no doubt in my mind, they knew that there was a one-way ticket. And they did it anyways. And then they snuck through the enemy lines in the middle of the night. They approached the walls, got shot at by the sentries. They started cussing them out in English. They realized they were reinforcements. They brought them in. 6 days later, the massacre, the assault on the Alamo happened, and all those people were massacred. And it's just this huge. They are recognized, but not to the extent that I think they should be, in my opinion, because that's a huge act of courage, and that it just seems like history kind of just swept under the rug to a certain degree.
I agree with you 100%.
Well, before we got to the Alamo, we did a little patch ceremony. How did that feel?
It was awesome. It's like, hey, like we did it. We're just maybe just a few blocks away.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie, the last 9 miles, maybe 10 miles, like that was the hardest for me. Like it was brutal. But getting to that back alley where we did the patch ceremony, I was like, man, this is, like it was just an incredible feeling of huge accomplishment. Like for me, I think for not only me, but of course everybody. Like I said, everybody had their own things that they were going through, and guys who had failed before who had made it, so it was like a little bit of redemption, in success, in like this victory. You gave a pretty good speech, like firing up people, and then we get the patch, and I was like, man, and I'd seen people with the patch, and I was like, man, I'm patched in, you know what I mean? It's like like we had talked about this before, and I shared this with you, but like, one of my prized possessions now, you know what I mean? Like it's just a little piece of cloth. Mm-hmm. I look at my Yarborough knife you get when you graduate Special Forces training course. It's issued to you. You can't buy them. Like you get your Green Beret and your Yarborough knife. Like I cherish that thing. That knife, and my beret. And like I think up to that moment, that was like one of the biggest achievements, probably the biggest achievement of my life, was becoming a Green Beret guy. So I don't take that thing out of my safe. It's very rare it sees the light of day. So that, and I shared that with you and with the patch. And I was like, man, this patch represents like the biggest, challenge I've overcome as an amputee. You know what I mean? So like I look at that little piece of cloth, that probably cost 75 cents to make or something like that, like, and I just wrecked myself for that thing. You know what I mean? I put myself through some really, I mean, man, I got beat up.
Yeah.
And all for a little piece of cloth. But beyond that, I mean, it holds so much significance, so receiving that was just like, man, I could walk. You could drop me off at Gonzales again, like I'm on such a high, and like I would do it again. Like that's how good I felt. But going into the Alamo, I was honored when you asked me to say, hey, come lead with me. You know what I mean? I want you by my side. So I didn't think I was worthy. I was like, man, there's other people who should be in the front.
No.
And I felt kind of bad, but you're like, man, like be by my side. So I was like, yes, sir. And seeing my family and the other families that had gathered there, like coming down.
So what was it like? We're walking side by side, leading the whole crew. And as we approach that back wall, before we make that left-hand turn, and you see the people, there were some guys playing drums. What was that? What was that feeling like for you?
It was awesome. I mean, it's hard to explain, but all I knew, I was like, man, this is like, don't forget what we're representing. We're representing the Immortal 32. So it's like, walk a little bit taller. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, don't limp, don't baby your injuries, whatever was going on. I was like, man, like walk tall, walk proud, knowing like we did these people an honor. Like we did what we set out to do, and we honored their sacrifice. And so, look the part, act the part, so just coming across there, just trying to, like I said, be a good representative of Project Grit and the Immortal 32 crew. So, and of course, like you're overwhelmed, you see your family and people were there, and you had the people in period costume, I wasn't expecting that. So that was like a pretty cool surprise. And then you see all the tourists, and then you see the people from the Alamo there to kind of welcome us, and people were clapping, people have no idea what's going on. It was a very special moment. It was a huge honor, like I said, especially to be by your side and head up to the wreath, in front of the Alamo and on the lawn was pretty awesome.
It was pretty epic. So if you had one word to describe the Immortal 32 Ruck, what would it be?
Man, that's a good question. Just one word. It's humbling. I think that's it. Mm-hmm. Like it pushed me to places where I hadn't been in a long time, physically and mentally, especially when you're walking through, Seguin, like at 2 a.m, 1 a.m, or whatever. And you're just like, man, this is a challenge because, it was dead quiet. Everyone's kind of in their own space mentally. There's a little bit of chatter, but, and it was humbling. Even like a simple act like walking, like I took it for granted until I lost my leg. I'm like, man, how would you? And I would look at people on the road march, and I'd be like, man, I wish I could walk like this guy's walking. Like I'm struggling to keep up, but it's just simple walking. You know what I mean? But I was like, man, it's just a good reminder. Even though I live with it every day, but like I'm watching this, like, happen in real time. It's like, man, just don't forget don't take for granted the things that, like walking. We get to do every single day. We're doing on the 75-mile trip. So, yeah, I mean, it was humbling for sure.
Mm-hmm. So doing the Ruck, did it give you a sense of camaraderie that you felt like you had when you were in the military?
Yeah, as a tribe, like I said, I think I said earlier, I was like, that's what I miss. I miss like real connection with people, like like-minded people. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's like, man, we're paying to be here, to go suffer together. In kind of a ridiculous challenge, you know what I mean? Like an event. Because like I said, everyone's like, dude, why would you want to do this, first of all? And secondly, like, why would you pay someone to go do this? You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, if you have to ask, then you don't understand. Right. But like these people get it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, connecting with those people, I'm fairly confident. I know for a fact I can call someone like, hey, I need some help, or hey, whatever. Like, and without question, they'd be like, yeah, what do you need? So, you don't find that anywhere these days. So, right. Coming out of that or going into it, even the build up, doing the training events, stuff like that. I was like, yeah, these are the time people like that would answer that call. The people kind of you need in your life that we're going to be there to support. So, and then be there for them too. If they ever made that call, like, yeah, I'll be there. What do you need? So that was a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah. It's a special bond that when two people go through hard things together, that is pretty indescribable, but there's a special thing that happens when you go through hard things together that creates a bond that's unbreakable, and it's one of the many things that I learned from doing the Immortal 32 Ruck and other like jiu-jitsu or whatever, it's one of the things that just really take away from it. And I know I spent a lot of my life oh man, I don't like other people. I don't need other people in my life. But the truth is, everybody needs a tribe. And I mean, if you think about it, like, what is prison inside prison? Solitary confinement. They take you away. If they can't find any other way to punish you, they take you away from everybody. And that's like the form of punishment that really gets to people, And I know having like-minded people that, like you were saying, you know, it's like I could call any one of those guys and be like, yo, dude, I'm going through some shit, and they're going to be there for me. I know at least one of them is going to step up, you know, and be there for me. And that's you can't replace that, you know. That goes a long way for me, you know.
Especially in today's, today's society, you know, a lot of people are about themselves and looking to boost themselves and chase things, you know, that kind of don't matter. It's hard to find those people. It can be, you know, but you're right. I think by someone who's willing to challenge themselves in such a way, like those are the people like I want to be associated with.
Absolutely.
You know, so yeah, it's a good feeling coming out of the back end, you know, even for the folks that didn't make it, you know, still communicating and corresponding with these people. It's like, hey man, we're still here for you. You know, like even though you didn't finish, like, man, like what can we do to help you get back on that horse, you know, a year from now, you know, help you with whatever you're dealing with in life and the struggles. You know, people, I see it, they're still corresponding, you know, like, hey man,
Absolutely.
stay strong or whatever they're going through, like just checking on them. So you don't have to be a finisher. I've seen that, like to be part of like the tribe, you know, we're not really kicking anyone out, you know, it's just, they're still there. So.
Absolutely. So with this whole experience that you've gone through, what did that really teach you about yourself?
I'm still a big dumb animal. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that's it. You know, I look back, I'm like, man, I still got it. You know, I'm older, you know, I'm fatter, you know, like, but I'm still strong, you know, like I can still do stuff. You know, I've learned to adapt because I've had to. You know what I mean? But I was like, man, like whatever that was inside, like all those years ago, you know, growing up and being in the military and all that stuff, like whatever that is, I still got it. You know, like I just showed not only myself, but a lot of people like, hey man, like whatever those limits you think you are, like that wasn't it. You know what I mean? I can still go and I can still do, now, does that mean I'm going to go out and like do a 100-miler? Like probably not. You know, like will I do the Immortal 32 next year? Like absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it's just like one of those things of like, man, I still got it. You know what I mean? So whatever it is, and I think there's people on that ruck too. They're like, man, I got it. You know, like whatever that it is for that person, it's just reaffirming like, yeah, I still got it. You know, or I'm capable of doing this. So. Yeah, I think that was a huge takeaway for me. Like I said, I just remember going to bed that night. I was like, yeah, man, like a little bit different, but I still got it. You know, whatever that drive is, you know, that mental state of like not quitting, figuring a way to push through and like not letting people down. And like, you know, I hate to say this, like proving people wrong too.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people who were like, dude, can't even do this.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
You know, like you shouldn't and you won't. So getting to the Alamo was a pretty sweet feeling. So,
Yeah.
you know, and people were like, you know what? I take that back. Yeah, I've had people say that to me, like, I take that back. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'll take it. You know, not to put my thumb in their eye, but I was like, you know what? I appreciate it. So
if you could go back to 2012, what would you tell Daniel?
oh, man, if I can tell pre-injury,
Sure.
man, if I can go back and tell him what I know now, I'll tell him, hey, zig, don't zag. You know what I mean? Like, go this way, you know, and avoid that little landmine. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's not much I would say. I mean, because, you know, I've had people ask me, like, if you could go back in time, would you change what happened? You know, I'm like, it doesn't matter because I can't.
Right.
Like, what's done is done. So there's no sense on dwelling in the past or reliving the past of like, man, I wish this didn't happen. Or, you know, I wish I could go back in time and you know, do things differently. Because I'm like, you're wasting time, you're wasting energy of like going back and thinking about something you can't change.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I tend not to even think about those things. You know, like what I would say to myself back then, I have no idea. I guess to be point blank about it because it's something I don't think about. Do I get caught up wishing, like I said, I look at people walking around, I'm like, or running after their kids, playing soccer or baseball or something like that. I'm like, man, I missed that for sure. But I was like, don't sit here and envy that because it doesn't matter.
Can't change it.
I can't change it. I'm still here, and that's good enough. You know what I mean? So learn just to kind of take it as you get it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a thing I tend not to think about because there's nothing I can do about it.
Would you tell post-injury Daniel anything?
Post-injury? Oh man, what would I say? I mean, I think just never. Yeah, that's a good question. If I could go back and see myself learning to walk or being in a hospital bed, it's like just never take anything for granted. You know what I mean? Like figure things out. You know what I mean? Like it's not the end of the world. And I've told people like you don't need, in my opinion, you don't need 2 legs, to live a full, meaningful life. You don't need, does it help? I'm sure, like it makes things easier, of course, but like having a fully able body, doesn't make for, like a fulfilling life.
Right.
Like say, just take advantage of the fact that you're alive and you get to do something every day. I relate it to my buddies that are dead, and like I get to do something, we get to do something every day that they'll never get to do again. It's taking kids to ice cream, like, hey, let's go get ice cream or let's go to the movies or, let's go grab a burger or something like that. And those little things that we get to do every single day that they'll never get to do. Like those kids left, they saw their dad leave when they were a little kid or a baby and never saw him again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we get to do those things. We get to read them a story at nighttime or take our wives to dinner or whatever that looks like, and they'll never have that again. And it's something that's, like I said, I think a lot of people take for granted, because in an instant their lives have changed. So I try to remember that, like just don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't go down that hole of drinking or popping pills or, all that kind of stuff. Cause I was like, man, those guys would do anything to have at least one day again with their families. So, that's a big driver for me. So just keep looking forward.
Absolutely. What's the biggest lesson you learned from the suffering and the pain and everything that you've experienced?
Biggest lesson? Man, it's kind of cliche. I mean, it's like I said, you're alive. Like I hurt every single day. Like I'm just beat up. But it's a reminder that like, hey, I'm alive. You know what I mean? So it just kind of ties back into what we just talked about. It's like, man, like don't complain about it. Just enjoy it. The good and the bad, because like I said, I think my experience of war fighting, being in combat, like seeing guys disappear right in front of my face. It's like, man, that's a real, death is a good reminder of like, what life is and how precious life is. So for me, it's like, man, like that pain you get to feel every day, like just to take it in and go forth. You know what I mean? So it's not always easy, for sure. But like I said, it's a good reminder of like, man, you get to be here another day. So make the best of it. Don't shy away from that, and certainly don't numb it. Like I said, don't waste.
That's huge.
Don't waste it. Earn it every day. So, like I said, it's not always easy, but that's my approach to it. At the end of the day, I pull my leg off, I get in my wheelchair, and kind of wind down a little bit. I'm like, man, it was all worth it. You know what I mean? Like this day of just getting through and doing whatever it is I got to do. Like just wore out and just beat up, but man, it was a good day. So, to wake up, do it all again the next day.
Right on. Man, you truly are an inspiration, and I feel honored to have you as a friend. And I love you, brother. I love you, man. And you live by this. You might have lost your leg, but you didn't lose your life, and that's huge. That's really huge, and it's an inspiration for all of us, And I love to see what's coming next, man, because I feel like good things are happening here, and keep this thing going. So
I appreciate it. It's man, I'm happy to be here. And find this group and connect with you, man. It's just been awesome in the short amount of time. I was like, man, Terrence is a real guy. He's like the guy. Which excites me too, because I'm always like, what's next? What are you doing next? Where's Project Grit going next? I'm curious to hear what that looks like, because of course, man, Terrence is setting something up. Where do I get in line? You know what I mean? So. Yeah, I'm curious to see what's next for you and where you want to take the organization. I'd love to hear about it and just kind of see where your mind, wants to take the next set of, challengers, and how you want to build the community even stronger. So
I got some big ideas cooking up, and we'll get
not surprised.
We'll get into that. So. How do people find you?
Instagram, 3/4 Cowboy, just one word. So that's kind of where I live at these days. So check it out, find me. Let's do something cool together.
So look him up, 3/4 Cowboy on Instagram. Dude, it's been a pleasure talking with you, man. And we'll probably have another one of these conversations here in the near future.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff, brother.
Thank you.
That's it for this round of the Legit Grit podcast. If it hit home, don't just listen, live it. Share it with someone who's still in the fight. I'm Terrence Ogden. Let the world chase comfort. We'll be right here earning it. See you on the next one.